Thanks for joining us. I'm Alec Dinkoff, here with Steve Todd, founder of Open Sourced Workplace. How are you doing today, Steve?
Doing well, Alec. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. And this is our segment where I pick his brain on some articles and topics current in the industry and articles that have been read on Open Sourced Workplace. Specifically, I just read How to Deal with a Negative Coworker on Open Sourced Workplace. The article's live. You can see it, and there should be a description in the comment section or below it, below the video. This article covers all sorts of types of personalities found in an office. And there's sometimes negative personalities, or at least personalities that conflict with each other. And it kind of gets into conflict resolution, which is good in any office. And I wanted to ask you today, Steve, do negative coworkers impact companies negatively?
Yeah, Alec. And I think this is a sort of a topic that resonates with most people, right? We all have probably in our heads when someone says a negative coworker, someone pops into their head. I won't say who pops into my head, but we all know who they are. We all know who their habits are. We all know their personalities, right? These are people who gossip, backstab, who sit in meetings, go yes, 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 and then you come out of the meeting and it's just like do nothing. And just like these are the ones that just really irritate and just really drag productivity, emotions, and really it just really inhibit the development of teams and so on and so forth. So to your question, do they impact an organization negatively? Absolutely they do. And the challenge for managers is always to understand, is this their natural behavior? Has something changed within their actual personal lives? Because there may be reasons why people behave in a certain way, and there's context to understand those different things. And then there is the other aspects. Well, if the personality is just that bad and there is oil and water and people just don't get on, then that's where I think an organization or a manager has to sort of start having those conversations about evaluating what's the right approach for the organization and also for the individual at hand. But to answer your questions, absolutely they have a negative effect. Dave Ramsey, who you may be aware of, he has this rule: no gossiping within his organization whatsoever. And the reason he has that is because of the negative effect it has on individuals. When someone hears one person talking negatively about somebody else, you alter someone's perception of how everyone who hears that perceives that individual. You've just diminished their ability to influence and actually to drive value for the organization as well. So there's some really important lessons to learn from Dave Ramsey.
Well, in a situation like that, you mentioned the manager needs to assess the situation or the employee. The article suggests using tactics like humility, kindness, positivity to uplift the negative coworker, or if you're the negative employee, to uplift yourself. Do you agree with these kind of methods? And if yes, or even if no, do you know any other methods that work as well?
So, and I think it's a great question, because in essence, it actually speaks to the fact that actually a human's natural behavior isn't to be negative. So you have to try and understand what is the reasons for it, right? What is the root cause of that negative behavior? Is there something going on in their personal lives? Is there a circumstance outside of work? Is there a circumstance that's happened within the workplace with one individual that two people are just not getting on, and having them in the same team in the same meetings just causes friction? And isn't hindering the rest of the team. There are many ways to deal with it. And I think that's where the humility, the kindness, and the support of actually trying to understand the real issue at hand. Because as I said, as humans, we're not naturally conflictive. We're not naturally negative. And I think for an individual, if you find yourself in that situation, then I think you have to, and you owe it to yourself and the organization to sort of seek help. Right? Because, we've talked about it before, how a lot of organizations do provide these third parties who can provide that support, who are professionals, who can assess what actually is the root cause and help the individual find the root cause of whatever that negativity is within. And most of the time, it's something that's outside of work. It's something that's been brought into the office environment that actually is driving a lot of that negativity.
Exactly. There's so many things that could go into it. Complex variables. You really have to dive in and figure out what's going on. And that's the job of a manager, to manage. But then the question is, even if you try and fix the activity or negativity in the workplace, when is enough enough? When does that manager, the company, the boss have to say, we've tried to understand, give leeway, we've tried to work with you, or maybe even help them find help in other areas depending on the situation? When do they have to draw the line and say, we're sorry, but you're no longer a good fit?
I think it's important to communicate all of that when an employee first starts with an organization, right? You have to educate and instill that culture of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. What I think is unfair to managers, to companies, and to employees, if those lines change, move through time and move between individual to individual. So I think it's really important that an employee handbook is established where the rules and criteria are clearly noted, behavior that's accepted and behavior that's not acceptable. If the behavior is one where it is continually negative and continually dragging down teams, then I think you have to go through and go back to that handbook and actually follow. This is what the culture actually within the organization is. This is what the behavior is. And I think that's what you have to follow. Thankfully, I've never been in a situation where I've actually had to go through that type of behavior and actually manage something like that. But I know with my view on, open source and where I want to go with that is, if I feel there was somebody who was just negatively impacting, obviously with the structure that's in place with freelancers, it's a lot easier decision for me. I think whenever you build personal relationships, as you often do whenever you're in an office environment, it becomes a lot more complex. But I think the actual employee handbook that everyone receives when they do start with an organization has to be clearly outlining the behavior and the culture that's accepted and what's not accepted. And I think when it gets to a point of no return, so to speak, then I think then you have to start following those rules.
Perfect. So that rounds it all the way back, where when do you let an employee go? Well, negative employees impact the company negatively. So don't let them into the company. Set those barriers, set those guidelines ahead of time. So the whole entire situation is hopefully gone around. Perfect.
Yeah, and to follow on that, so I mean, you go back and your points, so whenever that person comes into the organization, right, they were not negative then, right? Something is lost, something has happened, and whether that's a personality conflict within the organization, or whether it's an external factor that actually drives that behavior into the organization, I think that's where the human resource department is so important, because they can cut through, analyze, and they're so experienced at sort of identifying those characteristics and noting where the actual behavior is instigated from. And most of the time, a simple move in position, move in location or department usually addresses and fixes those things when it's an internal conflict of personalities. And then when it's an external factor that's influencing, that's again where HR, with a third party experts that they can turn to, can really help the employee deal and manage with whatever that external factor is.
Perfect. Well, thank you for the insight, Steve. I really appreciate your time. For everyone watching, like, share, comment, subscribe. If you have a question for Steve, put it in the comments below. You can find us here every Wednesday here on Open Source Workplace on YouTube. And you can also see the articles and other things we talk about on Open Source Workplace. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.
Cheers.